A family favored one twin's college, ignoring the other, until a $100,000 scholarship exposed their bias, sparking a journey of self-made triumph. My name is Emily Sullivan. I was born in Maine on a mild, sunny, early spring morning with sparrows chirping outside the hospital window. For minutes after me, my sister, no, technically my twin sister, Abigail Sullivan let out her first cry. 4 minutes. Such a small gap that most people would laugh and say, "You're twins." That's basically the same. But to our parents, those 4 minutes marked the line between being loved and being overlooked. Even in my earliest years, I felt the difference. Not with reason, but with glances I didn't receive, hugs I never got, and the way I was brushed aside like an afterthought. Abigail was always chosen first. My mother, Susan, always called her my little angel, while I was just Emily, please stay quiet while mommy's busy. Abigail got a pink bike with a flower basket before I even knew how to ride. I got Sophie's old bike, worn brakes, and a ripped seat. When we were 6 and joined ballet class, Abigail had a custom-made sparkly white dress. I wore last year's costume, faded and above my ankles. I used to think maybe I was just imagining things, that my parents loved us both the same, and I was just too sensitive. But when I was 7, Abigail fell off the backyard slide. Just a light scrape on her knee, but Mom ran out like it was a tragedy, scooped her up, sobbed, and shook like she was falling apart. A week later, she was still telling the story to friends, neighbors, even the mailman. I fell too, off the tallest pine tree branch in our yard, hitting the ground, dirt all over my face, knees scraped and bleeding. My dad, Robert, looked through the window and calmly said, "Emily's tough. Let her learn how to get through it. No hug, no comfort, just a band-aid and a go wash your hands." I didn't know what a child had to do to be loved equally. I learned not to cry. I learned not to need. And then I learned to hide my feelings because the weaker I looked, the more I was seen as a burden. I'll never forget one Christmas Eve. Abigail got a 3-story dollhouse with working lights, opening doors, and a spiral staircase. Me? A notebook and a pen. Mom said I seemed like the writing type. I smiled and thanked her. That night, I lay in the dark, watching the flickering Christmas lights through the window, hugging the notebook tight, not because I loved it, but because I had nothing else to hold. The only person who ever looked at me differently was my grandmother, Eleanor. She lived in Vermont and only visited once in a while, but every time she came, it felt like I was standing in sunlight. She always asked if I was hungry, if I was cold, if I had something I wanted to talk about. She called me Little Emmy, the only name that ever made me feel special. One time, when Abigail showed off a new crystal bracelet, I said nothing. Grandma quietly came over and placed a wooden hair clip in my hand, my name carved on the back. "It's not expensive," she whispered, "but it's one of a kind, just like you." Since then, I always wore that hair clip whenever I felt invisible. It reminded me that someone, just one person, once truly saw me. My childhood wasn't a warm collection of sweet memories. It was more like a diary with missing pages, each one a desperate attempt to be noticed, always ignored. Though I used to believe that if I was good enough, tried hard enough, did everything right, they'd see me differently, the truth was some things were never mine to control. But I refused to let that define me forever. Not anymore. I discovered my gift for writing in 4th grade when my essay about a summer by the Maine coast was picked to be read in front of the whole school. It was the first time I got applause, not from my parents, but from classmates and teachers who didn't carry the quiet comparisons of my home. I stood there, cheeks burning, heart racing, looking out at the seats where Abigail sat beside Mom. Mom clapped politely, eyes still on Abigail's new dress as she showed it off to her friend. From then on, I wrote more. I wrote small stories, things I couldn't say out loud, quiet sadnesses and dreams I'd never told anyone. My work was published in the school newsletter and praised by teachers as mature beyond her years. Abigail drew a picture of the sea and some pines. Mom stuck it on the fridge and called it raw talent. When I brought home a district-level short story award, Mom just said, "Don't let it make you arrogant." I learned that silence was a language, and in our house, it often meant we don't care. Abigail only had to smile to be called charming. I had to win things to be noticed and still got ignored. Once, Abigail and I entered the school science fair. I built a basic wind turbine model from recycled materials. Abigail made a colorful clay lighthouse. It didn't work. When the judges awarded me 2nd place for the whole school, I turned, searching for Mom's eyes in the crowd. She wasn't there. She was with Abigail, taking photos of her next to the faulty lighthouse. "My little artist," she beamed. I walked home alone, my award wrapped in my coat as it started to rain. My dad, Robert, was watching the news. I handed him the certificate, hoping for pride. He glanced, nodded mildly. You're a smart kid, he said. I know you'll be fine. I didn't need constant praise. I just wanted them to say once, we see your effort. But that never happened. In high school, I scored a perfect mark on Maine's state language arts exam, something only 3% of students in the state achieved. The school held a ceremony. I gave a speech in front of the school board. The principal even wrote a letter home. Abigail got a B+ in history that term. Mom showed it off to every neighbor like it was a Nobel Prize. I used to dream that if I worked harder, pushed myself to the edge, they'd eventually have to notice. But I realized for some people, favoritism isn't about reason. It's a choice. And I wasn't the chosen one. Still, I kept going. I woke up early, walked to school in the snow, joined the journalism club, wrote for the school website, and volunteered at the public library. In rare spare moments, I wrote stories, ones where forgotten girls always found their voice. One night, as I was editing an article for a national competition, Abigail knocked on my door. Emily, Mom says you should let me take the car to Jessica's birthday tomorrow. You don't have plans, right? I said nothing, just looked at her and closed my laptop. She knew that meant yes. And just like always, I stepped aside. But I thought to myself, let her go. I'm preparing for a longer journey, one she can't even imagine. I knew one day the world out there would see me, not as Abigail's sister, but simply as Emily Sullivan. And when that day came, I wouldn't need anyone to say it out loud. I got into the accounting program at Bowdoin College in Maine. The surprise? Abigail chose the same major. When I heard, I froze for a few seconds. I'd never seen her show interest in finance or numbers. But Mom simply said, it's a good job field. I want both of you to have stability. I didn't say anything. I was used to silence. On move-in day, Abigail had our parents escort her to her dorm. Dad carried every suitcase to the 3rd floor. Mom arranged everything from pillows to a lavender-scented diffuser. Her room was spacious, sunny, with a view of the campus pines. Me? I signed in alone. My room was half the size in the basement, damp with peeling paint. It took me nearly a week to clean and hang a few old photos of Grandma to make it feel less cold. My parents paid all of Abigail's tuition and living expenses. She got a brand new laptop, a family credit card, and a bank account that was topped up every month. She posted photos of lobster dinners, new purses, and parties with friends. I was different. I got a partial scholarship and had to cover the rest on my own. I worked as a library assistant at night and cleaned classrooms early in the morning. Every day, I woke up at 5 a.m. to sweep 3 floors before my first class. I used to think being a janitor would be shameful. But then I realized, what's shameful about trying to survive? I also signed up to tutor high school students. Each week, I taught 3 basic math classes and 2 SAT prep sessions. Afterward, I'd rush back to the dorm to study. Abigail? She'd usually be lounging in the common room with a face mask on, watching movies, and complaining about the stress of school. I knew people probably thought I was too intense. But I didn't have a choice. I had no safety net, no backup plan. I couldn't afford to fail. One time, while mopping the 3rd floor of the business building, I overheard Abigail laughing in the hallway. She was bragging to a classmate about a party the night before. My twin sister? She's probably buried in her books somewhere, maybe cleaning a classroom. I didn't respond. I just tightened my grip on the mop and kept going. Still, I didn't let bitterness take over. I spent my free time reading advanced accounting materials, attending small seminars, and volunteering at Excel workshops for freshmen. Once, when Professor Mitchell asked a question about financial reporting standards and no one answered, I raised my hand. He nodded with approval, then came up to me after class and said, Emily, you've got what it takes for audit work. I'd like to recommend you for a winter internship at my firm. What do you think? I was speechless. That night, I called home, excited to share the news with my mom, hoping just one congratulatory word would warm my heart. But all she said was, that's nice. Abigail just signed up for a therapeutic yoga class, supposed to be really good for mental health. I stayed silent. I didn't blame them anymore. I just felt lighter because I finally understood that their validation wasn't necessary for my success. While Abigail drove to school in the car my parents bought, I rode an old bike to work at a grocery store. When she talked about summer in Bar Harbor with her friends, I spent my break in Professor Mitchell's storage room, sorting receipts and writing practice reports. I didn't have glamorous check-ins or shiny party videos. But I had something she didn't, control over my own life. And I began to believe, maybe because no one paved the way for me, I had to learn how to build my own. A road that might be rough, but it's mine. I started my 5th semester with a kind of determination I hadn't expected. I had learned how to make the most of every spare minute, every small opportunity. While Abigail spent her time picking outfits for the school's spring festival, I buried myself in the library studying international financial reporting standards. I knew I had no one backing me, so I couldn't afford to waste a single chance. One Friday afternoon, I went to Professor Mitchell's office to submit a financial analysis paper. Just as I was about to leave, he called out, "Emily, I have a friend at a regional audit firm. They're looking for summer interns. Want me to put your name in?" I froze. "I'd love that, Professor." He nodded. "Then send me your resume and transcript by Monday." I walked out of his office empty-handed, but my heart was full of hope. For the first time, someone offered me a door I didn't have to knock on first. That weekend, I worked on my application non-stop, tweaking every sentence of my cover letter, adjusting every period and comma like it was the key to my future. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Baxter & Sons. They'd accepted me as a summer intern in their internal accounting department. The internship was unpaid, but for me, the real value was the experience. I woke up at 6 a.m. to reach the office by 8, then rushed back to the dorm for my evening library shift. I took notes on every process, saved every sample file, asked questions about every small detail, and eventually, I was trusted with real technical tasks. I also discovered a special topics course on financial risk management taught by a former IRS analyst. It was meant for senior finance majors, but I took a chance and emailed to ask if I could attend. To my surprise, he replied, "If you commit to every session and do the work seriously, I'll give you a shot." I never missed a class. From there, I got invited to an advanced CPA prep seminar where I first heard about the prestigious Pinnacle Excellence Scholarship, awarded to top senior accounting students. The requirements were tough: an almost perfect GPA, a personal essay, and letters of recommendation from at least 2 professors. Still, I quietly began preparing. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Abigail. I only told myself each night as I sat alone in my room, just take one more step. While I was still struggling to finish my essay, Professor Mitchell called me into his office. He handed me a thick envelope and nodded. "I wrote you a recommendation letter. No need to thank me. Just keep going the way you have, steady and strong." I nearly broke down in tears. It was the first time I felt truly seen, not because Abigail was my sister, not because of high scores, but because of who I was. I submitted the application on time. Nearly 2 months later, while I was sweeping in the library, my phone buzzed. A new email popped up with the subject line, "Congratulations, you've been selected for the Pinnacle Excellence Scholarship." I stood frozen in the hallway, tears rolling down my face. I had done it. That night, I told no one. I bought a small cake, sat by my dorm window, and watched the campus lights. I whispered to myself, "Emily, you don't need anyone to lead the way anymore. You've found your own." I knew this wasn't the finish line, but it was a milestone, not for others to validate me, but for me to believe. All those quiet years weren't wasted. When the official award packet arrived, I opened a thick envelope from the Scholarship Foundation. Inside was a formal congratulatory letter, a list of benefits, an invitation to the national recognition ceremony in Washington, D.C., and one final note that made my heart race: "You may bring 2 guests to share this special moment." I sat still for a long time. Outside, it was drizzling, each drop tapping the window like echoes from the past. I used to think that if this day ever came, if I was honored on a national stage, I wouldn't need my parents there. I'd stand tall, alone, and smile, knowing I finally felt worthy on my own. But that evening in my old dorm with its dim yellow light, I picked up the phone and called. Mom answered on the 3rd ring. "Emily, I'm getting ready. Some friends are coming over for dinner." "What's going on?" I tightened my grip on the phone. "Mom, I was selected as one of 6 students nationwide to receive the Pinnacle Excellence Scholarship. The ceremony's in Washington, D.C., next month. They said I can bring 2 family members." There was silence on the other end. Then Mom said quietly, "Oh, congratulations. That sounds important, huh?" Then she called out, "Robert." Emily said something about a scholarship. Dad's voice chimed in from a distance, mixed with the TV. "Yeah, she's always been a smart kid. We knew she'd be fine." I didn't know what I was hoping for, maybe just once to hear my mother say, "I'm proud of you." But she didn't. I ended the call politely. "If you can make it, I'd love for you to come. But it's okay if you're busy." "I'll check the schedule," she replied, her tone no different from talking about a weekend trip to the farmer's market. I hung up. The screen went dark, reflecting my blurry face. Something inside me cracked, not because they didn't care, but because I still had hope. I thought I'd moved past needing their validation, but deep down, the little girl clutching grandma's wooden hair clip was still waiting for someone to be proud. I flew to Washington, D.C., alone, wearing the square-neck black dress I'd saved up for months to buy. In the grand hotel hall where the ceremony was held, every other scholarship winner had family with them, beaming parents, relatives hugging, snapping pictures of every moment. I stood alone at the registration desk, wrote my name, and placed a dash in the guests section. The ceremony began. Each name was called, and each student stepped on stage, introduced with their impressive achievements. When it was my turn, the announcer's voice rang clear, Emily Sullivan, Bowdoin College. A true testament to self-made determination. With a partial scholarship, she worked multiple jobs, secured internships, completed advanced coursework. Emily is a symbol of resilience and drive. I walked up to thunderous applause from all directions. The stage lights blinded me, but I still saw the third row on the left, the seats my parents could have filled. I didn't cry. I'd come too far to be shaken by an empty chair. I stood tall, smiled, and accepted the award from the foundation's director. Afterward, while everyone gathered for photos, I quietly stepped outside and called the only person I truly wanted to share this with. My grandmother. She answered on the first ring. There you are, my Emmy, her voice warm as May sunshine. I followed every update about the scholarship. You did it. I couldn't hold it back anymore. In the cold wind of D.C., I cried like the 6-year-old girl who once hugged a Christmas notebook. I wish you were here with me. I'm always with you in your heart. And listen, don't waste your tears on those who couldn't see your worth. You stepped onto that stage with your own 2 feet. That's what matters most. I nodded as if she were standing right beside me. Back in my room, I opened the small envelope in my purse. It was a handwritten letter from the foundation director. Emily, we didn't choose you just for your grades, but for a life story that truly inspires. Keep walking the way you always have. The big door is open now. Don't hesitate to walk through it. I smiled. I hadn't needed my parents to lead the way. And now I didn't need them as a backdrop to shine. The Pinnacle Excellence Awards ceremony was held at the National Conference Center, a sleek, modern building in the heart of Washington, D.C. As I stepped into the grand lobby, everything felt breathtakingly formal, a red carpet stretching from the entrance, white flower arrangements edged with silver lining every podium. The chandelier lights refracted into thousands of sparkles across the students' gowns and me in a simple black dress holding a worn-out clutch. I felt like I had just stepped into another world. I arrived earlier than required and found a seat near the back of the hall, quietly observing. Bright laughter, warm hugs, congratulatory whispers echoed from families accompanying their children. Some were guiding their moms to the photo booth. Others were straightening their dads' ties. I pressed my lips together and looked away. When the program began, the lights dimmed. The host walked to the center of the stage, introducing each honored student of the year. One by one, they stepped up. Some had developed accounting apps for small businesses. Others had won international awards in financial risk analysis. I clapped for every single one, not out of politeness, but because I genuinely understood what it took to get here, what it cost just to make it this far. Then it was my turn. The host smiled, his voice warm and dignified. Emily Sullivan, an outstanding student from Bowdoin College. She has proven that strength doesn't need to be handed to you. She earned her own scholarships, paid her own tuition, actively sought out internships, and never stopped improving her skills. Emily is living proof of resilience, independence, and unwavering belief in her own future. Applause filled the hall as I stepped onto the stage. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I didn't look at the audience. I walked up, accepted the certificate, shook the foundation director's hand, and kept my smile steady. As I turned to pose for the photo, my eyes instinctively scanned the left side of the audience. I froze. Abigail. She was sitting there in a deep red dress, clutching a small purse, eyes wide with disbelief. Beside her, my parents. My father stared at me as if he couldn't comprehend why I was on stage. And my mother, she sat upright, expressionless, lips pressed tightly like she was holding something back. I didn't know how they got there. I hadn't confirmed anything over the phone. Maybe Abigail had decided to bring them. When the camera flashed for the photo, I turned away. No nod, no smile. I didn't need a picture to remember an uncomfortable moment. After the awards, recruiters and executives from major audit firms began making their rounds, shaking hands, handing out cards, chatting with students. A woman in a teal suit walked toward me and extended her hand. I'm Margaret Hayes, Director of Recruiting at Harrington and Associates. We were very impressed with your profile. If you're interested, I'd love to invite you to our Boston headquarters to talk about a full-time position after graduation. I nodded slightly, accepting her card with both hands. Thank you very much. That's the place I'd always dreamed of reaching. Just then, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. My mom. She was walking over, her eyes carrying a hesitation I'd never seen before. Emily, I didn't expect the ceremony to be this big, she said. I didn't know you had done so much. I stood tall, my voice calm. Because you never asked. She froze. Abigail stood behind her, her gaze shifting between the two of us. My father jumped in, sounding slightly flustered. You really are something. But why didn't you tell us? If we'd known, we could have helped. I gave a soft smile, not mocking, just a smile of someone who finally understood. I spent my whole childhood trying to be seen by you. But now, I don't need that anymore. I turned and walked toward the recruiter area where new doors were waiting to open. For the first time, I carried no hope of being acknowledged. For the first time, they saw who I really was. But it was too late for that to matter. That night, after the ceremony ended, I went back to the hotel alone. The DC night air was freezing, but my head burned with heat. I thought I'd feel hurt, empty, regretful. But strangely, I felt nothing. Just a deep quiet, as if after all these years of waiting, I had finally stopped hoping and also stopped resenting. The next morning, while I was packing to return to school, my phone rang. It was Abigail. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. Where are you? She asked, her voice softer than usual. At the hotel, getting ready to head to the airport, I replied. Can I come see you just for a few minutes? I sighed. Part of me wanted to say no, to shut it all out and walk away clean. But another part, the part that had been the little girl standing in Abigail's shadow all her life, whispered, hear her out. 30 minutes later, Abigail knocked on my door. She wasn't wearing makeup, just a hoodie and jeans, completely different from her usual polished look. She hovered at the doorway for a long time before finally stepping in. I don't know where to begin, she said. Last night, watching you walk across that stage, I realized I've never really understood you. I sat on the edge of the bed, silent. She sat across from me, eyes red. I always thought I was the one under pressure, but now Mom and Dad are starting to say I need to be more independent. They're bringing you up as an example. I know that's a good thing, but honestly, I feel like I'm the one being compared now. I raised an eyebrow. Strange. That feeling's familiar. I lived with it for almost 20 years. Abigail lowered her head. Did you ever wish I'd disappear? I didn't answer right away. I thought about the days I quietly cleaned classrooms, the nights I ate instant noodles while she was out partying, the times Mom showed off her test scores to neighbors while mine were stuffed in a drawer. Finally, I said softly, no, I just wanted to be seen. She took a deep breath. I'm jealous of you, Emily. Jealous that you're so capable, that you're strong without needing anyone. I thought you were cold, stuck up. But now I see it. You're not cold. You're just tired of having to be strong for so long. I turned away. If she had said this earlier, maybe I would have cried. But now, it felt like hearing a song I knew too well, too familiar to move me anymore. Abigail, I said, my voice gentle but firm, I used to want an apology. I used to want Mom and Dad to stand by me just once, but last night, standing on that stage, I realized I've come far enough not to need that anymore. She said nothing. After a while, she asked quietly, so now what? Are we still sisters? I looked her straight in the eyes. I don't know. Maybe it takes time to understand that being sisters isn't about sharing blood. It's about kindness, respect, and standing by each other even when no one else does. Abigail nodded, something like remorse flickering in her eyes. When she left the room, I felt lighter, like I had finally put down a suitcase I'd been carrying for years. I didn't need belated praise. I didn't need half-hearted hugs. What I needed, I had already given myself, the freedom to live by my own worth. I moved to Boston on a gray day, drizzle veiling the skyscrapers like thin curtains of an unfinished past. The city didn't welcome me with a smile, but I didn't need that. I hadn't come to be comforted. I came to begin. I started work at Harrington and Associates, a top-tier audit firm with its headquarters on the 37th floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston. At first, I felt like I was trapped in an endless maze, deadlines, emails, stacks of paperwork, back-to-back meetings, and the measuring stares of seasoned colleagues. But I wasn't afraid. I was used to fighting alone. Every morning, I woke up at 5:30, made a cup of black coffee, and stepped into the packed subway with earbuds in and files in hand. In a world where everyone seemed to be chasing something, power, money, fame, I chased only one thing, the freedom to be true to myself. My tiny apartment in Back Bay was all I could afford, one bedroom, a living space that doubled as a kitchen, and a window facing the brick wall of the building next door. No balcony, no Charles River view, but it had something I always carried with me, inner peace. Mom called occasionally, usually on weekends. The conversations never lasted more than 3 minutes. Are you eating well? Yeah, I'm fine. Work wearing you out? It's a lot, but I'm used to it. Abigail's thinking about taking another certification. I told her to follow her sister's lead. I replied with a short okay. No blame, no expectations. We were more polite acquaintances than a family that once lived under the same roof. Abigail messaged me a few times, too, sending pictures of herself attending seminars and saying she was looking for a full-time job at a financial consulting firm. Her messages no longer carried that show-off tone. They felt cautious, as if she was trying to find balance in a world that had begun asking her to grow up. I didn't hate them. I just no longer belonged to their world. In Boston, I had my own rhythm. After work, I took an advanced financial data analysis course. On weekends, I'd stop by a used bookstore on Beacon Street, pick up a novel, and sit for hours by a small window corner. One time, while reading The Bell Jar, I received an email from the project director. They wanted me to lead the audit team for a new client. I sat still for a moment after reading it. 3 years ago, I was mopping classroom floors. Now, I was about to lead an audit team for a multi-million-dollar company. That night, I came home, opened my window, and looked at the night sky blanketed in artificial light. Boston never sleeps and never waits. But I had caught up. And I knew I was living the life that little girl once dreamed of, even when no one believed she could. A week later, my mom called again. Emily, are you coming home for Thanksgiving? I looked at my calendar. Thanksgiving landed right during the week I'd be presenting audit results to the client's board. No, I'm busy. I have a major project to prepare for. Oh, I see, her voice softened, and she hung up quicker than usual. I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved because, for once, I chose my work, my dreams, and myself over fulfilling a role someone else had scripted for me. Family to me had become scattered memories, not because I gave up, but because I stopped chasing. I don't know where the future will take me, but I do know this, whatever happens, I'll no longer wait for anyone's approval to know I'm enough. At the end of my first year at Harrington and Associates, I was promoted to associate. Not a giant leap by many standards, but to me, it was a clear milestone. I was no longer the girl trying to get by, but someone actively building her own future. I started saving, not for luxury bags or vacations, but to buy something more valuable, choices. I wanted the freedom to pivot someday, to pursue an MBA, switch to financial analysis, or start a business without needing anyone's permission. I also began to open up in my own way. I joined a mentoring group for senior year accounting students, exactly what I had once wished I had. Once a month, I'd sit with young students and talk about my uneven journey, the late nights, the silent failures no one knew about, and the moments I wanted to quit but pushed through anyway. One of them once asked me, "Did you ever feel sad that your family didn't support you?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window where the golden sunset shimmered across the Charles River. Yes, I said, but I realized, if you wait for others to fill your glass, you'll stay thirsty forever. I chose to fill my own. I used to live hoping to be seen. Now I live so I'll never look back with regret. Abigail still texts sometimes, her tone no longer arrogant, no longer competitive. She told me she found a job at a small firm in our hometown and was thinking about enrolling in a project management course. Once she wrote, "I'm still not where you are, but now I get why you're so strong. I'm trying to learn that, too." I didn't reply to that message, but inside, something softened, not because she finally acknowledged it, but because I no longer needed to win. Sometimes the moment you stop competing is when you've truly won. I still get a few calls from Mom each month. The calls no longer feel like obligations. Some days, she talks about small things, the roses blooming in the backyard, a new pie recipe she learned from her senior group. She no longer asks about work, not because she doesn't care, but because I no longer need her to. Sometimes I wonder if things had been different back then, if my parents had shared love more evenly, if Abigail hadn't been so shielded, if I hadn't been labeled the one who can handle herself. Would I still be this strong? I don't know. And maybe I don't need to know anymore. One Saturday afternoon, I passed through Boston Common and saw two sisters playing tag. The older one slowed down so the younger could catch up. And when they both fell onto the grass, they burst out laughing without a care in the world. My heart tightened, not from envy, but because I had finally let go of wanting to live like that. It took me years to understand, not everyone born into your family will be your support system. But because of that, I learned to choose the people who are my coworkers, my students, the ones who trust me unconditionally. I built my own kind of family, not from blood, but from respect and genuine connection. In that world, I wasn't the extra. I didn't have to be exceptional just to be heard. I was simply me, and that was enough. When I step off the subway each morning, sunlight hitting the edge of my coat, I don't need anyone to remind me I'm on the right path. Each steady footstep on the city pavement whispers that to me. My third fall in Boston passed in a blur of sunshine and busyness. I had just completed the most complex audit of my career for a global real estate firm. The results exceeded expectations, and my direct supervisor recommended me for a senior associate position. No party, no fireworks, just a late evening, setting my laptop down on the kitchen counter, flipping on the kettle, and smiling to myself. I didn't need applause because I knew without a doubt I had done it. Every now and then, I get cards from Abigail, birthday, Christmas, or just thinking of you. She's now living in Portland, Maine, working at a fintech startup. Her messages carry more sincerity now, and I've learned to reply, neither too close nor too distant. My relationship with my parents remains distant. Mom still calls whenever there's something noteworthy about Abigail, but it happens far less. Our conversations are now confined to general questions like, how's work, or is it snowing in Boston yet? And I only answer just enough. No anger, no desire to fix what's long been lost. Once, Mom texted, sweetheart, sometimes I think if we'd talked more back then, maybe things would have turned out differently. I read it but didn't respond because I no longer need what-ifs. I've lived through them, walked through them, and kept going. That spring, I accepted an invitation to be the keynote speaker at a major conference on women in finance. Standing before hundreds of people, I shared my journey, not sugar-coated, not edited. I spoke about the girl who once mopped hallways in college at dawn, who washed mugs in the library to buy textbooks, and who studied alone at night because no one reminded her she deserved a chance. At the end of my speech, I said, we don't need anyone else to validate our worth. We can do that ourselves through every small action, every time we stand up again, and every time we choose ourselves instead of pleasing others. As I stepped off the stage, an older woman approached me and held my hand. Thank you for saying what so many of us never dared to admit, that sometimes the absence of family support doesn't weaken us. It makes us stronger than we ever imagined. I nodded, my heart warming in a way no words could fully explain. That night, I walked across the Charles River Esplanade, the lights reflecting on the water like strands of golden thread. The city was still bustling, still in motion. But inside me, there was a rare stillness. It took me years to understand this, blood doesn't guarantee support. Family isn't just where we're born. It's where someone genuinely wants to see us grow. And sometimes, that place isn't the home we grew up in, but the relationships we choose to keep, the ones who walk beside us, the ones who believe in us, and even ourselves. I don't blame my family. Not anymore. They lived the way they knew, loved the way they could. But I've also learned that I have the right to reject love that's hollow without heart. I choose to love myself, the girl who once sat by the dorm window with a small cake to celebrate her scholarship, the woman now standing strong on her own without needing anyone to lead the way. I don't live for recognition. I live so I'll never have to bow my head to myself. And in that, Emily Sullivan is no longer the daughter who can handle herself. She's the one who rewrote the meaning of worth, of family, and of love through lived experience, not borrowed definitions. Looking back, I don't regret the years behind me because they shaped the person I am today, not perfect, but real. And that, to me, is enough to be happy.